goes. Ooh, ooh, ooh.
Do, 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 do. I was doing my little
Wow,
pre-roll
that's
dance.
hot. I was just trying not to spit my coffee on my keyboard. So it was really hot.
Hey, everybody. Happy Friday.
Hi, everyone.
How
Friday, week one of the challenge is in the books. And,
books?
I think because we don't really have a lot of questions this week, and that could be because there's really not a lot to be said about how do you find a copy editor.
Right.
But let's kind of start here. So you and I are going to be putting books forward as sort of the demo for this challenge.
Right.
And what I'm very excited about personally, and I'm guessing if I'm excited about it for this reason, there are others that probably feel the same way. But I have a lot of experience with all the parts and pieces that we're going to be talking about over the next 2 months, just not necessarily in the context of how do I use it for indie publishing. So,
Right.
like, I have a website, but I wasn't really gearing it towards indie publishing. So there's some specific things that I need to do to my website in order to make that work for this publishing path. Same thing for newsletters. I've written newsletters out the wazoo, but not ever to sell my own books. I ran the newsletter for my podcasts. I write the one for Dabble. So again, I have like the experience, but not in this context. I've written jacket copy, but for a query letter, not for the back of my actual book. So
Right.
I'm excited because I'm just going to be thinking about all the skills that I kind of already have in my toolbox, but making them work for me in this context. Now, you, on the other hand, Hank, you have done this before. You have put these books through the paces. So you
Yes.
are the expert.
The thing is that the process is ever changing, and if you become an expert today, um, you have to keep learning. You have to stay on top of trends and things like that. So, I'm using this summer series as kind of a tune-up for the things that I already have experienced, but now I want to make sure I'm staying on top of the way things are working in 2025. I've been working with a publisher lately, and I've kind of not published anything independently in a couple of years. So I need to get my feet wet again because I do have some stuff that I'm publishing with a publisher, but I also have things I want to publish indie. So I want to, and like we've said, now is the best time to be an author because the control is back in your hands. You have the option. Do I want to traditionally publish? Do I want to indie publish? Do I want to, work with a hybrid publisher? And you can do it all. And kind of gone are the days of them locking you in and saying you have to publish with us and no one else.
Yeah, you're one bucket or the other.
Yeah, I don't know of any publishers that are making those sorts of demands on anyone anymore. And, and even if they do, that's why pen names and things like that, are literally a thing.
So I have a couple of things to say about that. So first of all, there's a strategy, and maybe this is a great place for us to start today because we don't have a ton of questions about editing in particular. And let's talk strategy since we're at the beginning of this
Yeah.
sort of course of lessons. So I have a friend, her name is Libby Hawker, and she publishes both traditionally and indie.
I know Libby as well.
And okay, you know Libby? Well,
Yep.
so Potato Girl, as we like to call her, because she is from the Midwest. Libby has a great strategy in that she sort of has, I don't want to say two separate brands because you can definitely tell it's her, but she has one flavor that she tends to traditionally publish, or at least offer to the traditionally published people first. I know she has sort of a gentleman's handshake deal with her traditional publisher, that if a book sort of fits what they put out under her name, she offers it to them first. But then she uses, so it's like Libby Hawker and then Olivia Hawker, I think, are the
Right.
two names that she uses. And
Yeah.
depending, one is traditional and one is indie. So she is able to put out, and God, last time I talked to her, she had like 50 something books out. I
Yeah.
mean, she's got a ton of books, this girl,
Yeah.
and she makes it work for her. And
Have you
so, go ahead.
Side tangent, have you ever read
Mhm.
her book on craft? I think it's called Take Off Your
Take your
Pants.
pants off.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, something like that. Yeah, where
Yes.
it's, going from being a pantser to a planner, which is, you know, uh, it's a
It
brilliant.
fits her personality.
It
She
does.
came when I was working for Happy Writers. She came and actually did a week-long challenge with Take Off Your Pants, where we walked
Nice.
people through how to plot a book. And so that was how I got to know Libby. And actually,
Nice.
I was on the phone with her when her agent called to let her know that she had sold 500,000 copies of whatever book was out at that point. And it
Incredible.
was delightful to just like be able to hear her reaction to, hitting that milestone. And so, that being said, her strategy is kind of split as to the types of things that she's writing. But years ago, before I started really getting serious about this, I have a girlfriend. Her name is Ruth Cardello. Ruth writes romances. And she sat me down and said, "This needs to be your strategy." And I ignored her, first of all, which was probably stupid of me. But I ignored her because she writes romances for adults. I was writing low fantasy for middle grade kids,
Mhm.
two very different publishing ballparks. And I was like, she just doesn't know enough about my genre to know that I don't think that strategy is going to work. But the more I think about it, I'm like, you know what? She might actually have been onto something regardless. So
Yeah.
the strategy that she recommended that I build a career off of. And so let's start by saying this is a strategy for building a career. She said, you need to have your backlist in your own back pocket. You need to own it, because that is where an author makes all of their money, is on their backlist. Romance readers find somebody, they fall in love with them, and then they want to buy and binge all of their books,
Yep.
particularly if there's a series that they really like.
Yep.
I think that works no matter what your series is. If you have a series and someone buys one of the books and they really like it, they're going to want to buy more.
Yep.
So, Ruth was like, you need to have a couple books and they need to be yours before you go after that traditional contract. And I think there might actually be something to be said about that. What do you think about that, Hank? I mean, you've talked to so many writers.
Yeah, the power of your backlist is, I think we talked yesterday in office hours about Hugh Howey, who was, he had enough foresight to realize that, I don't know if it's, some sort of super self-confidence or something, but he knew that one day he would break out, and that he needed to spend time grinding and just putting books out so that he would have a back catalog, so that when people did discover him, they would have things to buy. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how he knew that, but he did. And when Wool broke out, he had 7 or 8 books that people could at
Yeah.
least keep them busy and keep Hugh
Yeah.
Howey on their mind while he wrote the next thing, because we all know that every book you write is better than your previous one. And
Yeah.
things that are very first in your back catalog are not necessarily the things you're the
Yeah.
proudest of. Some people it is, but
Yeah.
we all hope that we get better as we go along.
Yeah.
But give them something to stay in love with you while you write your next thing that's going to blow their mind. And yeah, the more you can control that, the better.
The more money you make. So to
Exactly.
connect that back to editing, what you just
Yes.
said, and then we've got some questions coming in the chat. So this is perfect. Um, I worked with an editor once. His name is Nathan Bransford.
I
And
know Nate.
Nathan was a former literary agent,
Hmm.
right? Turned developmental editor, but he also writes middle grade.
Yep.
And so before I had my first call with Nathan, I picked up his first book, his first middle grade book, and read it and was delighted because one of my questions for him, my book was written in omniscient. I had been told not to write in omniscient, which just burns my britches every time someone says that to me. And I read his book and I swear it was omniscient. Like I took a highlighter and went through this book. So I immediately was excited and I was like, so Nathan, I read your first book and it's an omniscient. And he's like, no, it's not. I'm like, what do you mean? No, it's not. He's like, no, it's not. No, it's not. It's in third person. He's like, listen, I would write that book differently if I wrote it today. I was like, okay, touche. But he did not want to talk about that first book. And I was like, dang
You know,
it.
I love
So,
omniscient narrator.
me too.
You know, things come in and out of fashion. I realize, but that maybe that's another discussion for another day. Why
Totally.
rules
But,
and just because the current is going one way doesn't necessarily mean you have to drift with the current. But anyway,
and
that's another discussion for another maybe office hours.
okay, we've got some questions in the chat.
Okay,
And I say, I'm just going to start going down in order.
let's
And
do
if
it.
I missed one, you guys just yell out, dude, put your readers on, put your cheaters on. You missed something in the chat. So here we go. NJ, what is the easiest or hardest thing to you about self publishing?
Writing a book. Boom. Next question.
That's the hardest.
No,
I'm going to say marketing. I
yeah,
mean,
market.
I
It's
really feel
yeah,
like
always
that's
marketing. Yeah,
marketing. And we're going to hit some strategies
yeah,
later. So not to really push this question off until, August when we hit that that half. The first 4 weeks of hashtag indie public or hashtag indie summer, it's basically about getting your book ready to put out there. The
yeah.
second 4 weeks is kind of the marketing, building a platform, getting a launch plan. It's like those sort of logistical pieces. So we are going to talk about that more. But I mean, Hank, those are probably the
And
two hardest pieces: writing the
yeah,
book and
yes, yeah. And I said
marketing
the
the book.
writing the book kind of tongue in cheek, but
But
as always, executing an idea is always the hardest part.
yeah,
Marketing can be fun, can be
mm-hmm.
frustrating. It's all over the place and it's an ever moving target. That's why you have to be a student as well as a practitioner, because you always have to, stay on top of trends and what's working now. And, today Facebook ads are working and tomorrow Amazon ads are the thing that are really working. And then, next week newsletter swaps are all the rage. And kind of you need to learn how each thing works and be prepared to pivot and put more attention on one than the other when need be. But marketing is always going to be the thing that takes more brain power. But the good news about that is once you have a book written, unless it is extremely timely about current events,
Mm-hmm.
about the particular makeup of the government at the moment, and certain things that I'm trying to grab a very timely issue, and I'm failing. But for the most part, books can be evergreen, unless you're writing like techno thrillers, and those things tend to age out. Kind of, they can be
Mm-hmm.
tweaked, to be updated. But for the most part, 90% of the things you're going to write can be evergreen and can be given new life with new
Refresh.
marketing. So
Yep.
while marketing may be the hardest thing in that it can take the most time and effort, it also can keep your book alive for a long, long time. And uh, the conventional wisdom is that when a book first releases, it gets the majority of its sales, and you kind of have a long tail. They kind of drift down as new releases come out and things like that. But it doesn't have to. With good marketing, you can breathe new life into a new book or series and keep that alive and keep selling copies. I know all kinds of folks that remarket old series and get new sales all the time.
You know what I found really fascinating that somebody did with marketing, and I cannot remember her name, and I cannot remember if this strategy worked for her, but I tucked it into the back of my head just because
Yeah.
I was kind of interested in the idea behind it, which was she writes romance,
Hmm.
but instead of going back and refreshing and remarketing the same book, she wrote the same story from the other romantic partner's point of view. And then she put them both back out again.
Fun.
And I was like, oh, I kind of love that. Telling the same story, but from somebody else's viewpoint. I
Right.
mean, you know what's happening, but if you loved that story and you want more information, you want to be a part of that and live it in a new way. I thought,
Yeah.
what a great strategy. All
Right.
right. NJ's got another question, and I've got a joke answer for this, but it's also a
Yeah.
serious answer.
Be prepared. It's Friday. You may get a lot of joke answers. We will give
We're
you
a
serious
little
answers, but
we're a little slap happy.
yeah, we're a little slap happy today, so prepare yourselves.
How does self-publishing differ from traditional publishing? Well, one, who pays for it,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I
Right.
think that's
Yeah.
the thing. And who's in control, because the person
Yeah.
who's paying for it is the person who's in control.
Yeah. Yeah. Think of and someone had this analogy about the music business, and there's a lot of overlap between the music industry and the publishing industry.
Yeah.
Not always, but um, they said think of a record company as a bank. They're putting up all the money, they're providing the resources to get the album made and promotion and all of that. And then when you sell records, or when that used to be a thing, then that money is paid back to the bank. And then when that debt is satisfied, then you start making money. Well, very similar thing happens in publishing. The publisher is kind of a bank, and they provide the money. Uh, Sometimes that's upfront advances. Some of it's cover design, some of it's editing, some of it's promotion, and they front all of that for you. And then you sell books to pay back that debt, and then ultimately, hopefully, both of you start making money at some point in the future. So that's kind of the business side, and as opposed to indie publishing, where you are in control of everything on one hand, but on the other hand, you're in control of everything, meaning
Yeah.
you're responsible for everything. So,
I was sort of reading in the chat while you were
yeah,
talking, and so you might have said this already, but when you traditionally publish a book, you guys might not realize this, but you don't pick your cover like
yeah,
the marketing team does.
yeah,
And
and
as a
and
matter of fact,
sometimes you get input.
you might get, I was going to say, a couple of
Yeah,
choices, but if you say no to
right.
those choices, I've heard, actually, it was a girlfriend of mine said yesterday, if you say no, they just give you another iteration on the same choice. Like, it's
Yeah,
pretty clear this is what they want you to say yes to, but you
right.
don't get to choose your cover. You don't get to choose your title. I mean,
Yeah,
again, you give input, but the marketing team is the one that's going to pick a title, and they're picking a title based on what's selling in the market. Are
yep,
one word titles selling in your genre right now? You're getting a one word title,
yep,
So if things like that bother you, traditional might not be the place to go, because
right.
you've literally sold your book to these people to do what they want with it. And so I think that's control and money are the two biggest. So my
I have
joke answer wasn't too far
I
off,
have
huh?
no, it wasn't. It's, I've got a fun example of you not being in control of your cover. I'm gonna share this real quick and just so everybody can see what I'm talking about. Um, Jim Butcher's Dresden Files series, and you sent me an email earlier about Jim
I
Butcher,
did.
and I guess it was top of mind. But as you see on the cover of Stormfront, um, Harry Dresden is wearing a hat, and if let's see, where's the series? So then in the next book, Harry Dresden's wearing a hat, and as you go, let's skip on down the series, like book 10, Harry Dresden is wearing a hat. Nowhere in the books does Harry Dresden ever wear a hat. Never, 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 never. And it kind of became a joke that the cover designers thought that Harry Dresden ought to have a hat. And so on every cover, Harry Dresden is wearing a hat, even though Jim fought with them from the beginning. Harry Dresden does not wear a hat. It never once in any of the books mentions a hat. Yet now on every single cover, Harry Dresden is gonna have a hat. And Jim had
You know
no
what's
say so.
funny? I read all those books. I mean, I read them like a million years ago,
Yeah.
but I don't know that I ever noticed that about the cover. He had a hat
I don't
on.
know that I would have either if Jim hadn't told me that himself. We were having this conversation about how that, like he got some input on the cover, but evidently he didn't have a whole lot of input because he sold a bajillion copies and Harry Dresden still has a stinking hat.
Well, hey, covers are next week, so maybe we'll have to bring this up again.
Oh, we're
Uh,
definitely going to bring this up.
oh, yeah. Okay, so Jane's got a question here. So, if you had a limited amount of an editor, like for editing, who would
Mhm.
you go to first? A book coach, a developmental editor, or a line editor? Now,
Hmm.
I can sort of answer that first part for you.
Okay,
So,
but I have never used a book coach, but I know you have. So,
I've used all three of these.
so which one gave you the most bang for your buck?
If you are the person that has a hard time putting your butt in the chair and getting your book written,
You need a coach.
or if this is your first book and you are second guessing yourself every step of the
Mm,
way and you want someone to tell you what to do next, that's a book coach, because those book coaches are going to take, usually, so the program that I went through, I would give every other week, I'd send Jenny like 20 pages, right? So it was like up to 20 pages. So I'd write 20 pages, I'd send them to Jenny. She would essentially developmentally edit your book 20 pages at a time, because she would go through, she would give me an edit letter that says, hey, here's what you did great this week. Here's what you need to work on. And then she would tell me either, I think you need to circle back around and fix these things before you move forward, or I think you just need to keep going and make a note. Like, she would just keep me on track.
mm,
And if I started to take my book in the wrong direction, because she had my outline too, she knew where I was going with it. I wasn't pantsing it. So that's the other thing, is if you're pantsing and you're using a book coach, that's going to be harder for them to sort of keep track of things.
right.
But book coaches are really there. I think they are the most helpful if this is your first book, or maybe you've written a couple on your own and they've gone nowhere, and you've made a bunch of mistakes and you really need somebody to help you fix your process, or maybe you have something really broken in like your craft education. They can really help you sort of straighten that out. They're essentially going to teach you how to write a book while you're
Right.
writing a book. So that's a book coach. A developmental editor, you won't go to a developmental editor until you have a completed draft.
Right.
So don't even worry about pricing those out if you don't have a completed draft. If you think you can get there on your own, That's great. That's what a developmental editor is for. And when you hire that developmental editor, is again, it's kind of another personal preference. So I'm the type of person who I've got I've got the budget and I've got the feedback mentality that I don't mind giving a crappy first draft to somebody and paying them to help me figure out what to do with it. Most people, though, I know don't necessarily fall into that category, and they're going to revise it and do everything they can to get to the story to the place where they're like, I have done everything that I can possibly do with this story. Now I'm going to give it to a developmental editor who is going to poke holes and see the things that I don't see. Because remember, your story is in your head. So as you read your own work, your brain is filling in the gaps that other people might not see.
Right.
So a developmental editor is going to help you fix all of those.
Yeah.
A
And
line editor is the end. Go ahead.
right. And the farther you get into your author journey, the less hopefully you have to rely on these people that can kind of help you spot the holes, because
Yep.
I believe most everyone can put a story together with a beginning, a middle, and an end. We've all read books our whole lives. We've all watched movies. We understand how story structure should go. Now,
Mhm.
what that developmental editor or a coach is going to help you with is making sure that you take that vision from your head and making sure it translates to the page. And the more that you have someone kind of point out your weak spots, then the more you make those connections in your brain. And then the next book you write, you'll automatically be looking for those potholes. And then, you become better the more you do it. It's just a
Mhm.
natural part of growth. And, yeah. So just, if you think, well, this seems like a lot to have to go through. Yeah, but you will grow and you'll get better, and you'll have to rely on some of these outside um resources, the farther you go. Now, what I would recommend is that you always employ beta readers,
Uh-huh.
and people that you trust, and carefully choose beta readers from readers, not necessarily writers, not necessarily editors, readers that love your genre, people that read this stuff every week, that are constantly buying books, because they know how story structure goes. They know what's an enjoyable read. They know what is satisfying at the end. And if you have a giant hole in the middle, you could land a 747. They're going to tell you. And
Yeah.
now they may not be able to tell you. And so this is where beta reader feedback gets a little iffy sometimes. Is that they can tell you there's a problem. They don't necessarily
Know
they
how to
won't
fix it.
necessarily be able to tell you how to fix it. And that's where the coach or the editor comes in handy, because they can take that feedback and then tell you how to fix it. Beta readers, that
So
you're not really looking for advice on how to fix it. You just want them to highlight the problem areas.
So if you don't, like, let's say you're looking for cost savings, like places to
Yeah.
save money through this process. Like, I mean, I wouldn't be using a book coach because they're hella expensive,
Right.
right? Developmental editing, again, that's probably, I would say, out of all of the, so
Yes.
out of all the types of editing that we've talked about, that is going to be the most expensive.
Right.
So I think I generally pay somewhere in the realm of like $4,000 for a 40,000 word manuscript. That's what I've paid with the editors that I've worked with. You can get edits that are less than that. But if you're looking for a way to get some of that similar feedback, that's where a really solid critique partner can help fill that gap. Now, finding that solid critique partner can sometimes
Yeah.
be tricky. If you're a green writer and your critique partner is a green writer, I'll tell you what, it's going to be a blind leading the blind sort of situation.
Right.
You guys might write yourselves off into 100 million different directions
Yeah.
without staying course for what's, craft wise, story wise, what's solid. If you can find someone who's maybe a step ahead of you, who's willing to take a look at your book and say, these are the things that I see. And you're willing to, if they give you some feedback on your novel, then you say, hey, I'll beta read for you, or send me your work, or
Yeah.
whatever. You guys can do a little swap. A good solid critique partner could go, a long way to filling that hole without costing you any money. It's going to cost you time, because
Right.
you kind of want to be fair. If they read
Yeah.
yours, you read theirs, and you have
And
some
if you
reciprocal.
have a partner that is also a green writer, and
Mhm.
you want to just bring them into your process, just know that they will be a great set of eyes to help you spot problem areas, but they may not be any help in helping you fix it. And sometimes just knowing that there is a problem is all you need to know. You don't
Yep, exactly.
necessarily need a checklist, but just know that you can't lean on them too heavily because they're kind of in the same spot you are. But again, just knowing that there are problem areas, then you can start, with your creative brain looking at ways to rewrite that scene. Maybe there's a character that you just forgot existed. That happens, especially if you're writing 100,000 words. You can introduce someone in chapter 3 and then completely forget that you left them stranded on a cliff. It happens. The fact that someone just points that out to you, you go, "Oh crap, I need to go back
Alrighty.
to chapter 10 and have a fire truck drive by that can rescue them." And sometimes it's simple fixes like that, but you just need someone to help you identify them.
So the last one in the list here is line editor, and copy and line editing
Yeah.
is really what this week was about. But I think we have a lot of community members who have never had a developmental edit, so we've had a lot of questions about that, and I love that.
Yeah.
So line editing is what happens after you've written your story, after you've revised it, after you know all the pieces are there, after you feel like this story is ready to go out into the world. Copy editing, line editing, proofreading, there's they're more about making sure your voice is consistent all the way through, making sure your grammar is good, you don't have all those repetitive words. Like, have you ever read a page of your writing and realized you used the word like asymmetrical 6 times over the course of 3 paragraphs? Things like that. They're going to go through and help you clean up your work so that it's super readable. Now, in my opinion, if you only had enough money to hire one of these 3 editors that are in our list here, I'd 100% go developmental edit, because to me, if your story doesn't have bones and it's wobbly like jello and it doesn't go anywhere, nobody's going to read it, and they're not going to pick up and read your next book either, because they're like, this person doesn't know what they're doing. I'd rather have someone, and again, this is me, Abby Matthews, I'd rather have somebody to help make sure that I have a solid story. The grammar and the typos, yeah, that would embarrass the hell out of me if somebody found a whole bunch of those. But I think if you've hooked them into your story, into your world with your characters, they're going to
Yeah.
forgive a typo, a comma splice, whatever. Now, I know Doug feels differently. Doug's like, I'd hire the line editor. I've heard him say it. The
Well, the
copy editor, but
but the sad thing about line editing is that you can go through your manuscript 10 times, you can
yep,
give it to 10 different beta readers, you can then give it to a line editor, and you will still publish it with errors. It happens
yeah,
all the time. It's you know, at the end of the day, these are all human eyes reading it, and for whatever reason, sometimes we just skip things. Our we can see an error and our brain corrects it
mhm,
for us, and we just read right past it. And and it happens. I've got a book that I think was published by Penguin, I think it was, and it's on my shelf over there. I have to pull it. But I went through with a highlighter one day, and there are like 400 typos in this book, and it
oh my
went through
God,
I don't know how many
how many
rounds of
eyes?
editing, so many eyes, and it just happens. It just happens. So,
But
you
if
also
you've
have to
got,
give yourself a little grace that there
yep,
after you've done everything you can do, sometimes some things are still gonna slip out, and the good news about that is most readers understand that.
yeah. And
Yeah.
you've got Grammarly.
Yeah.
You've got, is it ProWriting Aid is the other
Yeah.
one that you can get. There are programs that you can put on your computer that will help you clean up a lot of it. I
Yeah.
have found if you rely on more than one of those programs, they tend to fight with each other and
Yes.
disagree over, are you using like AMA or ALA or whatever?
Right.
Like pro writing will tell me one thing and I'll fix everything and then I'll run it through Grammarly and it will undo half the changes. So my
Yeah.
only caveat with that is if you're going to replace a line editor or a copy editor with a program like Grammarly or Pro Writing Aid, just pick one of them and stick
Yeah.
with it. Don't jump around because they will fight. And so we've kind of sort of covered this over the course of this conversation, in that your first edit generally would be a developmental edit, and that happens while you're still in the process. After you've drafted, at some point during your revision, that's when you would have a developmental edit. I
Yeah.
usually have a second developmental edit before I move on to the next phase. I usually go back to that same developmental editor and I pay them to go through my story again and say, did I fix most of these major things that you've told me to fix? Did I do it right? Like I'm sort of looking for the check mark, the gold star. After that,
You're such a school
copy
teacher.
editing. I am such a school teacher, man. But after that, you go copy editing, line editing, proofreading. And what I have found are there are a lot of people that do these types of edits. They will give you a package deal. So I just hired someone to do the book that I'm putting out for this challenge. They bundled copy and line editing together. So it's a 4,200 word book. My copy and line editing together, or sorry, 42,000 word book. 4,200 is not that much. 42,000 word book. It was $400 to bundle those together. And then I also booked her for proofreading when I'm finished. I think it was like $100 to proofread, but she gave me a discount on that service because I put everything together. So for less than $500, I ended up with all of those polishing edits put together. So hopefully that kind of helps you guys think about, I don't know, do you think that seemed to be actually a pretty standard price when I was, and this is the first time I'm really kind of going outside of my friends circle to do things. So it does kind of hurt when you're not paying friends and family prices sometimes. But
My mic was muted. Sorry. And you can shop around. There are some hungry editors just getting started that will give you a price break. Just don't be afraid to Google search and look around. Um, and don't take the first quote that you get. Shop around a little more. That there Indie publishing has become mature enough that there are lots of people that have support services for the indie publishing industry, editors, book designers, page layout, cover designers, all of that. And there are uh, there's some competition that crops up from that, and take advantage of it. And it used to be there were like one or two trusted editors out there, and there's hundreds now because this is a mature industry with lots of people participating. Therefore, lots of support people are coming in to fill those spaces. So don't you know take some time, do a little shopping around, get some recommendations, ask them for a sample, and
Mhm.
you can get a better deal.
Also, know this, and this is something that I find tends to surprise people if this is their first time getting an edit of any kind. Usually, you cannot book an editor for a service and expect them to start your manuscript immediately. Oftentimes, you kind of have to get in line. There's some lead time to get on their list. They call it getting on their list. And I have found you, like for this copy editing, I think I booked her at the beginning of June and she could not take me until the end of August.
Mm,
So the particular editor that I chose to work with, I had previously booked an editor and waited about 6 weeks to get on her list and was ghosted. So
Mm.
there is one that I will not be recommending in the community. But so I had to start the process over again and get on a second list. But I did have to give her, it was more than 8 weeks. I think I had to give her
Mm.
lead time. So just know that's normal. If you reach out to somebody and you really want to work with them, especially if the
Right.
price is right, you might have to get in line behind other people that have found them too. So, all right, let's look at Jane's question. I should say okay, I did that one. All right. Do you make changes after each type of editing or do you wait?
Well,
Thanks,
if you take the developmental edit like we talked about, and that's why you do it first, because a misplaced comma doesn't matter if there's a giant plot hole that has to be either a scene rewritten, or supporting scenes rewritten, or whatever. So your text is going to change as you fill in, whatever the weaknesses are that the developmental editor is going to help you identify. So get those things fixed first, and then your punctuation and spelling and all that should be the very last thing that you do after you've made all of your other edits along the way. You worry about those are like polish edits. Those are things you're going to do right before it goes to the printer. And so that's how I approach it anyway. It kind of makes the most
Yeah.
sense to me.
Well, and I almost always wait before I make any sort of changes because if you've ever gotten a letter back from an editor, there is a hot minute where you become a diva. It does not
Yeah.
matter how centered or how confident you feel in your story or your ability. If you get a 10-page letter with someone telling you you have to do these 100 things differently, there is a moment where you just, it feels
They don't
very
understand my
overwhelming.
genius.
They don't understand my genius. And I used to always say, I'm gonna be a diva, and then I give myself 24 hours and I have to be gangsta about it, right? I just have to be like, okay, now we're just gonna go in and make all this happen. But the
Yeah.
truth is, if you read an edit letter, it's not going to sit well with you. You need to understand that going in, that it is
Yeah.
normal for it not to sit well with you. You are going to take it and your brain is going to read 1,000 stories into that.
Yeah.
Oh,
The first reading is
whatever
going to
it
be an
might be.
attack.
I walk away for a good week before
Yeah.
I come back and I read the edit letter again, because guess what almost always happens is I cannot find any reference to whatever it is that I've been bitching and moaning about in my head for the past week, because my brain just spirals
Right.
into thinking I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
And that is just, it's just a thing. So I have to walk away to get the perspective to be able to come back and be just detached enough that now I can start sorting through and I can say, okay, this is what the editor's really saying, or this is what I think the real problem is here, or this is what I think I need to do to fix it. And it's not as big a deal as I thought it was a week ago. So the time, I think, just helps you be able to emotionally
Yeah.
process what is oftentimes just an overwhelming amount of information. So, okay. Beta readers, do they come before or after editing or in between certain types? Again, I think Doug and I disagree with when you give your beta readers your book. Hank, when do you generally give people your books?
Um, I tend to go, um nowadays, I tend to go to the editor first, and then I have beta readers after that. Before, early in my writing career, I utilized some beta readers first to
That's
make
super.
sure that I was on the right track, because I didn't really have a lot of confidence, and I was figuring things out, and I just needed some people to help me, like, not tell me how to fix things, but just, am I on the right track? Does this make sense? Is this, and as I built that confidence, they helped me to build that. Then when you go to the editor, at least, it's not going to come back from them and they say, this is the worst piece of trash I've ever read. It so But now, I generally know how to construct a story, and I'm pretty confident, after a couple of rereads myself, I can spot if it's a good story or not. Then it goes to the editor, and then when I make some changes and plug any holes that are seen, then it goes to beta readers. You know,
Mhm.
but that's typically how I do it.
I use beta readers at two different points
Yeah.
in the process. And so my first beta readers usually, so my best friend Allegra is an attorney, so she reads all day and she's a speed reader. So
Mm.
she can literally read my book at night. I can give it to her before I go to sleep. And because she wakes up at like 2 a.m. every morning and reads until 4 and then goes back to sleep again, because that's
Oof.
how old we are. We have that problem sleeping through the night. She will read my book overnight and then be able to talk to me about it in the morning.
Yeah.
But her undergraduate degree was in English literature. So she has the background to be able to discuss books and she reads fast.
She
So,
has superpowers.
and she gives me honest feedback because she revels in telling me I suck at something because that's what friends are for, right? So she and I will discuss it. And usually she is one of the first people I will give my book to, even before it goes to an editor, because she's the
Yeah.
person that can help me find those holes. Then, after I have edited it and I've gotten it to the point where I think the story is solid, but before I send it off for those final polish edits, that's when I give it to the kids to beta read. Because if one of them says something that makes me want to change it, I want to do that before the book is polished.
Right. And
So
they're your target audience, so they
they're
kind of
my
need the
target
final
audience.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I believe Doug waits until it's been polished and it's to the point where he's almost ready to hit publish, right? That he sends it to beta readers. But I think
Well,
he
that's
might be using them more like advanced reader copies, looking for reviews, which is different.
yeah, that's the chaos that Doug chooses to live in.
So hopefully that sort of helped you determine, because a lot of these questions are what makes sense to you and your process and how you work.
Right.
So
Yeah. And I think it does matter what stage of your author development you're in. You know,
yeah.
do whatever makes you more comfortable with your story, and what what makes you feel like you're becoming a better writer.
Mhm. So Jane wants to know, how do you find an editor when you're in a really peculiar niche? So Readsy is a really great place to
Mm,
go because you can, first of all, you can quote 5 different editors. You can search editors based on genre, and then you can ask for quotes from 5 editors at a time. So you can send your little jacket copy blurb and your first couple of pages, usually off to 5 editors at the same time, and they will come back to you. And sometimes they'll offer the sample edit, but um, it's super important to find people in those niches, because if there are genre expectations that other people don't know that you are trying to adhere to, they can't
yeah.
necessarily help you. They can
Right.
help you with the story is story is story, right? So there are bones to every story, but very specific genre pieces, you're smart to want to look for those. I would say Readsy is really the best place to go. Hank, do you know any place else that
I,
would sort of, it's just
Not
research,
really.
basically.
Other than just, beating the
Word of mouth.
Google bushes, you're
Mhm.
other yeah, yeah. Readsy
Yeah.
is a great resource.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Journey says, what would you recommend for people doing their own editing? So we've kind of touched on that. Beta readers, critique partners, Grammarly, Pro Writing Aid. You can find people at the W campus that you might, be able to trade with. Hank, do you got anything other than those if you're kind of trying to DIY this?
Um, just really lean on those beta readers, those critique partners. Yeah,
If
I
you're
mean,
proofreading, go backwards through your manuscript, right?
oh
Isn't
yeah,
that one of the tricks that they say? So start
yeah.
at the end, the last sentence, the last paragraph, and go sentence by sentence and go backwards because your brain is then not
It's
processing
yeah,
story.
it's not flowing through the story.
Mhm.
Yeah, and yeah, a lot of those things will jump out at you for sure.
Also, if you're used to looking at it on your computer, print it and look at it on paper and export it, look at it on your Kindle or your phone. Sometimes just looking at it in a different format, on a different device, in a different room of your house, all of these things will help sort of get your brain out of that writing mode as well. And it's going to help you sort of, yeah. I think I've got so many binders, you guys, in my living room just lined up where I've printed my manuscripts so many times. And
Yeah. Oh,
so
Journey had a great idea. Change the font as
change the
well.
font.
That's a
Mm-hmm.
excellent idea. Anything
Yep.
that makes your brain have to think about what it's reading instead of just blazing through because it's already read it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's see. Tatiana's got a question here.
Okay.
How to decide if your draft is ready after editing it? I know most authors go through multiple drafts before publishing. True. As a matter of fact, when I was working for Author Accelerator, Jenny Nash used to say working with a book coach was by the time you finish your first draft, it actually feels more like your fifth. And the first time she said that to me, I was like, what do you mean it feels like your fifth draft? What are you talking about? She's like, well, I mean, you might have like 20 drafts before the book is ready. And I just remember going like,
What?
what?
Yeah.
So
Well,
yes.
this was the question that Michelle Hazen threatened to fire you over the other day.
Yeah, she did. She did because I said use your gut. And she's like,
Yeah.
that's not good enough, Abby. That's
That's
just
not
not,
gonna fly.
not gonna do it.
But
So
there's
we
a
have
bit of use your gut to it. I mean, let's just be honest, that
so
I
we
think the
Tatiana. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say the rule of thumb, uh, utilize your beta readers, utilize your editor, utilize your beta readers again after you make your edits. Uh, you know, read through it when you don't see any more errors and your beta readers say, I like this story, then you got to push publish and you got to go start writing the next story, or else you'll get in that loop and you'll never finish this book.
Yeah.
And just understand that there are going to be a couple of errors that slip through, but if you've utilized your editor and your beta readers, there shouldn't be any gaping holes, and your bone should be good. You may have some chip paint, here or there, but that stuff's just going to
It's
happen,
okay.
and it's going to be okay. And
I was
people are
gonna
going to wait for your next story that.
yeah. I was going to say, go listen to Hank's podcast from earlier this week because you'll hear us talk about it for like
Mm.
40 minutes.
Yeah.
So you can get a
Yes.
good answer there.
Yeah.
All right. Last says, my question will still be, when should I involve an editor? How far should I polish and do self edits? I know you discussed it the other day, but some reflections about it would be good. So I think we're
That's,
covering that a lot
yeah.
today.
That's
Yeah.
that's that's really what we were just talking about. Just um, when especially when you're first starting, utilize a developmental editor if you can. Utilize beta readers. Uh, do a line edit, and then once you've kind of been through those phases and you've got it as good as you can get it, then put it out and start working on the next one. That's
Yeah.
And Robert Heinlein had was it Heinlein's rules? Um, where he said, I'm sorry, this is great radio. I know. His rules, and take these with a grain of salt. But Robert Heinlein published a lot. You must write. You must finish what you write. You must refrain from rewriting except to editorial order. So that, and what he means by that, I've heard him talk about this, was not the thinking, oh well, what if I did this and go back and rework the novel. And when you finished it, if an editor said these things need to be fixed, fix those. But that he's talking about the second guessing of your story.
Mm-hmm.
You must put the work on the market, and you must keep the work on the market until it's sold. And then, indie publishing, introduces some new ways there, but it holds true. After you've done everything to do, you've got to hit publish, and you got to leave it out there, and you got to go write another book.
Mm-hmm. All right, little Bo Bleep, which I think is hilarious. I don't know how to ask this, but is it possible to contact an agent while still working on your manuscript, or does it always have to be complete? All right. So the answer is it really does need to be complete. So if you are going into an agent's slush pile, right, the expectation is that book is ready. And if they read your query and they ask for it, you need to be able to produce the manuscript. So I know that some people take 6 weeks to get back to you and respond to your query. They take, 8 months. I mean, I've literally had people take over a year before I get a rejection from an agent. Like, I don't even know why at that point they even bother sending me a letter, because I've long since crossed them off my list. But I have also gotten full manuscript requests within an hour of sending out my query. So if I send a query and then an agent asks me for the manuscript and I say, can I get it to you in 6 weeks when I finish it? You have already sort of like tagged yourself unprofessional. And that's the thing that you have to be really, really careful about. When you go looking for an agent, you are not looking for your next writing best friend. You are literally looking for a business partner, and it is a business relationship. And it is all about being professional. It's amazing how many people are not professional in their query letters when they send out a query. But the expectation is you put the query in the agent's slush pile. They ask you for the manuscript. You need to be able to produce the manuscript.
Yeah.
If you are at a conference and you are talking to an agent one-on-one, I think it's a little bit different story. And I'm going to say that because you are face to face with this agent and you have the ability to say to them, I am still working on the manuscript. I think it's going to take me another 6 weeks. I think it's going to take me another 2 months. I think it's going to take me till next week. You can have that discourse with an agent, and it's a little bit different than going into their slush pile. So I'm going to say the caveat to that is if you are in person and you are talking to agents at a conference, we don't always schedule conferences around our own writing schedule and when we have a book or a manuscript finished. So I think people sort of understand that, and it's different. But I would say, as long as you are clear to them while you're face to face, I still have some work that needs to be done. There might be some leeway because, they might say to you, great, when it's finished, send me the full manuscript. Or they might say to you, well, great, when it's finished, why don't you query me? Those are two different things, by the way, people. If they say, send me the full manuscript, that means they want to read the whole book. If they say, query me when you're done, that means you're going to write your query letter. You're going to follow whatever the parameters are on their website, give them 5 pages, give them 10 pages, and you're going to go into their slush pile. So always follow directions. That's really the only hard and fast rule in querying, though, is always follow directions. So whatever they tell you to do, it's like a pop quiz. Can you do it? Because if you don't and you're pushing boundaries, they're probably just going to cross off their list.
Yeah. And we're talking about writing fiction. Nonfiction is a completely
Mm-hmm.
different ballgame.
Yep.
Most of the
Yep.
time, they want a spec of what
Proposal.
you're thinking about, a proposal of what you're thinking
Mm-hmm.
about writing, and you sell a proposal and then go write the book. But that's a
Yep.
completely different thing than writing a novel or any sort of fiction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. Okay, NJ, I'm working with an illustrator for my first children's book. How do you go about self-publishing that? Is it possible to split profits, or should I buy the illustrations outright? Both are an option, right, Hank?
Yes. Absolutely.
You work it out.
Absolutely.
You work it out
Yeah.
with the illustrator.
Yep, that's between you and the illustrator, and you can pay for them, and then you
Mhm.
own the illustrations, and then it is completely your baby to publish, and you get all of the royalties. Or you can list the book on KDP, and you can list yourselves as co-authors, and then take a co-author split, and decide how you want to do that. But it is completely up to you. But both things are possible. It just all
Yeah.
depends on how if you have the investment up front to buy the illustrations outright, maybe that's the best way. It's just what do you think is best for your
In
situation?
So in Kid Lit, if we're talking picture books, so it's kind of sometimes we have to remember that picture books are kind of their own beast in
Yeah.
the Kid Lit world. If you're traditionally publishing a picture book and you are not an author illustrator, illustrators and authors are giving equal creative weight behind a picture book. So if you're talking about a picture book and you want to split profits, and you can find an illustrator who will carry that equal weight with you and sort of go in, and they're willing to take the risk and illustrate the book, and then you guys come out, just make sure you have a contract in place ahead of time, no matter which one of these ways that you choose. But if it's a picture book, authors, illustrators, splits, I don't think are uncommon. I was looking at publishing a chapter book, which, I mean, if we really want to get into the nitty gritty of Kid Lit, you have picture books, you have chapter books, you have full novels. The chapter book is sort of like Magic Tree House, those things that the kids are picking up and reading
Mhm.
kind of on their own independently for the first time. And generally, they have more illustrations than just a regular novel, but not as much as like a picture book. And I did price out illustrations for a chapter book, and I was just going to buy them outright because I wanted to be able to have total control over the project without having to negotiate anything with, like, essentially, an illustrator that I had come on to split profits with. And it wasn't looking like it was going to be too bad to be able to purchase those illustrations. But anyway, not to say either way, NJ, but either way,
Yeah. You
whatever ends up
yeah,
working for
both
you.
are possible. It just depends on how you want to do it.
All right, so Little Bo Bleep wants to know, do agents work as mentors for your book? As you can tell, I'm new to the agent query info stuff. So yes, generally now, these days, if you get picked up by an agent, you're going to have a completed, finished, polished, pretty much ready to go book to even get picked up. Now, agents all work differently. Some of them like to be really hands-on and editorial with their authors. Others are kind of standoffish. They're like, look, I'm just your salesman. So that really depends agent to agent who you get picked up by, what your relationship is with that agent. But oftentimes they will help an author decide, like, if you're kind of torn between two projects about what to write next, they would weigh in and tell you which one they think would be easier for them to sell, what the market might be leaning towards. They'd offer you, that sort of expertise. But that's really kind of more the traditional route, though. And we're kind of focused here for this challenge on indie publishing. And I wish that you could have a mentor for your indie publishing career, because
Right.
wouldn't that be awesome if you had somebody to say, like, this is what I see is really hot in the market right now. You could, you know,
I
kind of make
predict
decisions based.
I would not be surprised if those people did not exist already, but I predict
Yeah.
that that will become uh, kind of like story coaches are really coming into their own now. I really kind of foresee indie publishing um, coach mentor type situations popping up.
Yeah. All right. I'm kind of skimming through. Oh, here. You want to answer that one while I keep looking?
I
Courses for
heard
editing
some
to become an editor.
Okay. I heard something this last week about courses for editing to become an editor. Where would I find those?
I think it was B,
I
right?
think, I think it was B. I see you in the chat. Let's see. I saw something about how to find out the genre. Okay. Sorry. Uh, B, did you have information about how to become an editor? I feel like we talk about that with Michelle the other day?
I think we were talking about it at some point. I think it was with Michelle. You are correct.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we'll have to go back
Um,
and
yeah, I'll dig back through that and I'll post uh, in the community what we what information we find. Sorry, that kind of uh, took both of us by surprise. I'm drawing a blank, but yeah.
okay, we've still got a ton of
I,
questions. We've
well,
gone
Jane
over. Are
said,
you okay?
yeah,
Keep going?
Jane
Okay.
said author accelerator.
So
Is,
Author Accelerator and I worked for Author Accelerator. I can speak to that.
yeah,
You can go to that. They teach you how to become a book coach. And
right,
Jenny goes through all the parts of the process. So she goes over the how to part for editing and she breaks it up into fiction, nonfiction, and memoir. So depending on how, what books you want to work with, she can funnel you towards those. But then she also kind of has a heavy emphasis on the business and how you run that business. So
right,
she looks at both sides of that coin for if you want to become an editor. But I think B is taking some sort of online certification for, I believe it's just like the how to do the editing portion of that. So depending on which way you're thinking, if you're trying to build a business, the Author Accelerator thing is that's a pretty solid,
yeah,
cohesive program. So
yeah.
StoryGrid also does the same, by the way.
Story
So
grid.
StoryGrid does it as well. Are you okay to answer? We've got some more questions and some
Yeah,
have some
let's hit them.
overlap, but
Let's hit them.
all right. Here we were so worried we weren't going to have any questions, Hank. Have either of you ever gone through the whole editing process and decided not to publish your work while you're
Oh,
flying?
oh, NJ, you done gone off into meddling now. Yeah, yeah. I had a book that I wrote, and the more I dealt with that book, I just didn't believe in it anymore, and it was 6 months of my life wasted. Not really, but um, yeah, I actually just decided to kind of put it on a shelf for a while. Um, and I did write the book, but I just felt like there was something missing. It was a complete book, all of the dots connected and all of that. But I just and this is where you do have to lean on your author gut a lot, because I just didn't believe in it, and I put it in a desk drawer, which means a folder on my hard drive, and came back to it. Well, um, had a dream or something, and I'm weird like this. Like I'll wake up with ideas. If I don't know how to do something, I'll just kind of file it in my brain and try to forget about it. And I will wake up and have an idea that it came through a dream or something, but I don't remember the dream. But I have the solution for it, and that happened. Like I woke up and I'm like, I know what this book needs. I know what it's missing, and I went and I rewrote like the last third of the book, and it was a much better book. And so yeah, don't be afraid if your gut is telling you that even though it's finished, don't do it. Don't be afraid to put it aside and go do something else.
Yeah. I have 5 books sitting on my hard drive right now that I finished, and I wrote the first one, and I used a book coach. It was developmentally edited. I ran it through all the parts of the process. As a matter of fact, I mean, I sat once. So I have a friend who got his MFA from NYU in creative writing. And he and I sat down together one day and I added up the amount of money I had spent on developmental editing, book coaching, learning how to write a book. He added up his tuition costs for his MFA at NYU, and they were about even. But the difference was I had a couple of books under my belt and he didn't even have one. And so I put a lot of books through the paces with really the intent of learning and getting better. So Steve Martin did this Creative Live class. No, it wasn't Creative Live. What was the other one? Master class. He did a master class on comedy once. And in the commercial for the class, he said something along the lines of, these kids are always coming up to me saying, how do you get an agent? How do you get a job? How do you get a gig? How do you get this? He's like, but nobody ever asks the real question, which is, how do you get good? And when that class came out, I was working on my first book, and I talked with Jenny about that a lot. Like, I want to get good. And
Yeah.
so I put the time and the effort into writing these books, hoping they would go somewhere, but knowing every time I finished one and I started the next felt stronger. It felt better. And then the next, and then the next, and then the next. And I finally hit a point, and actually it was Michelle Hazen who said it to me, I believe. She was like, for the love of God, stop writing things that you're not publishing. She's like, you figured it out at this point.
Right.
It's time for you to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
And so for me, I deemed those books not good enough. I do think if I went back and reread them, I could rewrite them with a stronger skill set, and I could probably get them out pretty fast.
And this is where Heinlein's rule comes in, is that you may not believe in that book, but it might be someone's favorite book. When you finish it, you got to put it out. You just got to. You've got to, let it live in your past, and.
So Journey says, how do you get over the initial reluctance to start the revision process? Or is that just a me problem?
It's not just a you problem, but you just have to get up and look in the mirror and say, all right, we decided we were going to do this. Let's go do it.
To me, the hardest part about revision is the fact that you finish a draft and it feels whole, feels complete. And you're a little afraid to mess that up. But this is not like when I was in art school and I was learning to use a camera and I was using film. Okay.
Right.
Like, digital cameras and film cameras are two different things. And right now you're writing in a digital era, and all you do is you just duplicate that file and then you jump in and you mess it up, knowing that if you royally screw it up, you have the original copy there. Yeah. So don't let yourself be intimidated by the revision process if you're afraid of messing things up, because as long as you keep that first copy there, man, you're golden. You're golden. How do you not get crushed by editors? I am so sorry. If we had the answer to that, we would have $1 million.
Right. A literal bajillion dollars.
I think what Michelle said yesterday or Wednesday, actually, it really hit me for the first time after all these years of working with editors. I just assumed they thought it was in their job description to crush my soul. And she's like, no, they're just trying to make a good book better.
Yeah.
So you're going to have a good book that you could publish, but they're going to make 47 bazillion suggestions because what they're trying to do is help you make it better because they also believe in it. And it's not necessarily going to read that way. But again, that's our emotional
Yeah.
selves standing in the way of what should otherwise be sort of objective feedback.
Yeah.
You do not have to do everything they say. You don't even
Yeah.
have to do a tenth of what they say if you feel like it's not serving your story. I mean, if you're not going to do anything they say, maybe I would question, are you really ready for feedback? Are you open to feedback? Because if the
Right.
answer is no, do
And
not
why are
pay
you
to have an
spending
edit.
money for
Yeah.
Yeah.
But a little distance really will help you feel not so crushed.
Yeah.
Um, but
And a lot of it is the attitude that you come into the relationship with the editor. If you go into the you know the relationship understanding that they're there to help you be a better writer, not to take out their 11th grade English teacher red pen and mark it up. Understanding their intention goes a long way.
eventually you'll find an editor that you like
Yeah.
to work with. My editor of choice is Jen Braxma, and she's also a friend of mine, and we have similar backgrounds. But she is somebody that I've worked with numerous times in the past. I really like her feedback, and we have gotten to the point where I just say to her, Jen, I don't want an edit letter. I don't want inline comments. I literally just want you to make me a bulleted list of change this in chapter 1, change this in chapter 2, change this in chapter 3. And so she will give me like 3 pages with a bulleted list, and I just go down the list and
That's
do what
amazing.
she says.
Yeah.
And it feels better. Like
Right.
I don't have that same reaction.
Yeah.
And so you'll eventually find somebody that you can have that sort of relationship with, and I
Right.
think that that really helps. And speaking of, what if an editor tells you to change something that you did on purpose? Yeah, then just
Yeah.
ignore it.
Editors are not book gods.
Yeah.
They're coming from a place of opinion. A lot of times, just like you are, and
Hmm.
sometimes you find yourself at loggerheads, and you just you each have different visions, and that just don't go into the relationship assuming that you're going to push back on everything they say.
Yeah.
Take it with an open mind, and then ask yourself, is this going to better serve my story? Or and that's where you just have to trust your author gut.
And I paid a lot of money to have a developmental edit on a book that when Jeff and I wrote it, we very purposefully wanted something that read like a 20-minute animated television show. All right. We wrote it third person omniscient for that very reason. We made it very visual, very colorful. We made it very funny. The editor did not like that. And she pushed back and she told me it needs to be third person limited. It needs to be this. It's too visual. You need to take all this stuff out. It's not going to sell because third person omniscient doesn't sell in the children's market. But we had made artistic choices, and those choices, she was influenced by what was selling in the current market, which we had already decided we did not care about because we were trying to do something very, very specific. And so when we got that edit letter back, we read her reasoning behind it. We realized we had made conscious choices to that were like kind of at odds with her reasoning. And we ultimately ended up just putting it aside because we considered the fact that she kept saying it's too visual. That was a win
Right.
for us because that was how we wanted it to read. So, it's all grain of salt. Sometimes, if you were writing something and you really, really wanted to sell it and then you might listen to her when she says you
Yeah.
need it to be third person limited because that's what sells. But, any thoughts on what to do if 2 of your beta readers drop off the face of the earth? Yeah, it happens all the time, Reed.
Yeah.
I think I once asked for like 10 beta readers, which is far too many, by the way, you guys. And I think I only had 8 that got back to me, and the other 2 never did anything with it. Now I think I send things out to like 2 or 3 beta readers, and for the most part, I get 2 or 3 back, but only because I now know that they're the ones that I can rely on.
Yeah. And you start the process with a bigger group, and you'll learn pretty quickly who's going to be uh and this is going to sound bad the way I say it, who's can be more trustworthy. It really has nothing to do with that. It's people have time and things competing for their time, and but you'll get a sense of who is going to be willing to put in the time for you, and it's a huge ask, you know,
Mhm.
you know, buy them a gift basket when they're done, something nice.
That's
But
what
yeah,
I do.
that's
I
going to happen.
usually,
Yeah.
yeah, give them a little gift card to say thank you.
Yeah.
Speaking of beta readers, who should or should not be your beta readers?
Readers. It's right there in the name. Readers. People that love your genre, people that read a lot in your genre, and ideally, if you can find that one person that, say you write science fiction, they're going to be walking around with a brand new sci-fi book every week. You want that person to be your beta reader because they understand the genre, they understand what is popular right now, what works, and they're wanting to devour everything they can get their hands on in that genre. Those are the people you want to be your beta readers.
I mean, which
Your
speaking of, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, your mom,
You want to finish?
not a great beta reader. If you need
No,
someone
you
to pump you up, send it to your mom. She's not going to give you honest feedback. She's just not.
yeah. So I generally like to include one cheerleader in
Yeah.
my round of beta readers, though, by the way. My cheerleader is not my friend Allegra, who I referred to earlier because she likes to tell me that I suck. I usually give it to my girlfriend Cassandra because her reaction at almost every turn is, oh my God, I can't believe you wrote this and I know you and this is amazing and it's the best thing I've ever written and you're my favorite writer and will you sign this piece of paper for me because it's going to be worth something someday. And there's something about that emotionally I know I need
Yes.
in order to be able to process some of the negative feedback that I know I'm getting ready to go into by either like agent rejections or, things like that. So I always have Cassandra read it because I can pretty much count on the fact that she's going to think it's the best thing since sliced bread. And
Yeah.
so,
And you take
I
her
would
emails
say,
and you print them off and you tack them to your wall so that you can see them. And the people with critical feedback, you don't print those out, but you make the changes you need. And then you look over at Cassandra's email and
well, and you guys have never met Cassandra, but she will whoop your butt, man. And so there is part that's like the joke in our friend circles. If anybody makes us mad, we're like, well, we better not tell Cassandra or she'll beat him up. And so she'll beat up your mom if you make her if you make her mad enough. So I should just say to all those haters out there, well, don't make me sick Cassandra on you because she thinks I'm amazing.
do right.
Um, have we ever beta read for someone? And the answer is yes. I actually
Oh,
beta
yeah.
read all of
Lots.
Jen's books. I mean, so we say you got to be a reader, but writers are readers. And
Yeah.
so, I would caution you behind having all of your beta readers also be writers because they are going to come back with a lot of editorial feedback that you may or may not want at that point.
Yeah.
They could have you second guessing if you need to circle back around and you need to fix things and maybe you're to the point where you're like, this book is how I want. I just need to know from my beta readers, was there just anything that I'm missing? I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of times I will give my beta readers a very specific question that I already know the answer to. I just need confirmation from. So,
Yeah.
like if I've completely rewritten an emotional arc or something, and I just want to know where did they start and where did they end? It's those sort of questions that I'm sort of looking for the answers for.
Yeah.
So Are agents necessary in self-publishing or just for traditional? They are just for traditional.
Yeah.
So you do not, we're taking them out of the equation here.
Where editors come in for indie publishers are, say a book is a breakout hit in the US and you're getting inquiries from someone in the UK that wants to publish that, then employ an editor who can help negotiate
You
those
mean an
publishing.
agent?
An agent, I meant, yeah, and film rights. Maybe you have a
Yep.
breakout hit that someone wants to make a movie of. That's get an agent for that. But if you're just strictly indie publishing your book, you don't need an agent. The agents help you when you want to get into other markets.
All right. So let's see. I'm working my way through. I think we
Working my
have all the
way back
questions.
to you, man.
Uh, do you edit between beta readers or do you? I give them all the same version.
Yeah.
Yeah, I give them all the same version. I mean, my only difference is if I have an early draft and I'm looking for someone to read it and I give it to my friend Allegra, that's kind of my outlier. But
Yeah.
and how
If you give
many
if you give different versions to different readers, then
hard to
that's going to be confusing for you to yeah.
yeah. I've really landed on if I have 3, I'm kind of
Yeah.
good. I
Yeah.
don't look for too terribly much
Yeah. One
feedback that
great
first
beta
time.
reader one great beta reader can tell you if there's a
Yeah.
major problem with your story. If you get 3, then you can kind of triangulate, if one then if one person reads it, they see a problem, but the other 2 don't, okay, maybe that's something that you can critically look at and maybe start asking that person why it didn't work for them because it did work for these others, that can help you kind of weigh out some of that stuff. 1 to 3 is probably perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely went overboard with my first book when I
Yeah.
had 10, but I was just so excited to share it
Yeah.
that I was ready to give it to everybody. And
Yeah.
so, all right. Well, I think we've hit all the questions. Thank
Think
you everybody for coming. This was amazing.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I
Oh,
saw one
don't worry.
other,
Is
um,
this it?
I that was not it, but,
Okay.
I send out, digital versions usually.
I give Allegra a digital version if she's reading an early copy. Recently, I did print mine, and it was like $7 or something through Lulu. I think I had 6 copies printed and sent to my house. I gave away 3 as beta reading copies just because I have young kids reading my book, and this feels real, and I felt like they would be more likely to finish it if I handed them this as opposed to like a binder, which feels like school. So that was my strategy, but you can just do the digital. Did you find the question, Hank?
I'm looking, was it B? I forget who asked the question, but it was something about how do you find out what's popular in the genre, and we're going to do a deep dive on that 1 week in the series, but I will give you just a real quick exercise that you can do for kind of doing some market research or genre research. Let me just pop this back up on the. So if you, that's not it. Let's see. Let's remove that and let me try to share this again. Sorry.
Yeah, Journey
Okay.
says Publishers Weekly Marketplace newsletter. Yep, if you pay for Publishers Weekly, that's a great one.
Yeah, yeah, that is a great one. But here's just some kind of down and dirty research that you can do just on your computer. Say you're wanting to see what's popular in science fiction right now. Go to Amazon and search science fiction. I don't know if you guys can. Let me see if I can blow this up a little bit and make it easier to see. If I
Yeah.
just search for science fiction, then you get kind of what's popular at the moment. Say I want to look at Project Hail Mary, which is Andy Weir's book that's having a bit of a resurgence right now because the movie's coming out. If you look at that and come down to the details where you see the genres it's in. Say I'm really looking for science fiction adventure and click that, you're going to get a listing of the top 100. And these are things that are selling in science fiction adventure right now. And you see, okay, well, we got Project Hail Mary's number one, Red Rising for Pierce Brown, Dungeon Crawler Carl. And you can get an idea of a couple of things here. You can get an idea of what's resonating with the readers in a particular genre. You can get an idea of what cover art is selling right now. So you can get some ideas of is
Idols.
it yeah, titles, cover art, the books themselves, and just start looking through the top 100, and you can start getting an idea.
Scroll
Yeah,
back
and
up
okay,
and look over all the way to the left
yeah,
where all of the choices are, and
yeah,
underneath fantasy, and it says science fiction. And then you see those are all subcategories. You're still down.
right.
Scroll up all the way to the top.
Oh, all the way to the top. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, over
So
here. Yeah,
right there,
for sure.
those are all subgenres. So if you don't know if you have a subgenre, what a subgenre is, where does
Yep.
your book fall, this is a great place. If you can go and find your main genre and then you look to all those other ways that Amazon classifies books, you
Yeah,
can see what all the subgenres are, because you might start to realize, oh, wait, mine does fit into this category. And
exactly.
then you can niche down that way.
And then you say, well, I have a story I think is kind of cyberpunk, and you can look through here and you can see, okay, what are people calling cyberpunk these days? And you say,
Mm-hmm.
well, the Primal Hunter, this, a lit RPG. Okay, that's really big right now, and just start doing some, um, yeah, do the same thing. Walk into your Barnes and Nobles, Books a Million, or whatever, and start looking at the different shelves and see what's hot. But Amazon makes it really easy because you can see the sales rank of things and tell what's really resonating with people.
Yeah. All
Anyway, just
right. What a fun way to end Friday, though.
right. Let's do it again next Friday.
Let's do it again next Friday, everybody. All right. Well,
Um,
we'll see you guys then. Nothing else we have more Indie Summer coming out on Monday. It's
yep,
all blocked and loaded and ready to
yep,
go. So cover art, market research. So that was a perfect lead in. Hank,
yep,
it's
and
like you planned that.
uh, and we have writing sprints on Tuesday, and then covers and market research with Jeff Brown on Wednesday. Are you going to join me for that one again, like we did this past week?
I will. I'm happy to.
Why not? Why not? Let's do it. And then word sprints again on Wednesday and Thursday, and then we're going to do a another wrap up next Friday, just like we did today.
Yeah. So, all right, everybody, have a great weekend, and we'll
All
see
right.
you on the flip.
Bye.